Hello, as you can see, it's 3:59 a.m. We're in our beloved classroom. Take a pan tour. It's not the same because you guys aren't here. But we're gonna film these videos so that it feels you can make it around. So that it feels like we are. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show. Riley, don't relax too much. Don't want you falling asleep. Who's ever holding Bisou? No lèche pas. And yeah, we're doing our best here. Thanks, Claire, for accommodating. So for my presentation, my paper is going to delve into the cultural appropriation of the haka in sports. Sort of when is it okay to do that? When is it not? Is there ever a time it's okay? In what context? That sort of thing. But before I do that, I want to give some background on the haka. It's the war dance of the Maori people in a region of New Zealand. They're a group that is considered the indigenous population of New Zealand. They still have a relatively large population today, but back in the 1800s, the haka was kind of first introduced to the public eye. The first time was in 1897 when the Maori contingent of the New Zealand Army visited London and sort of performed it just as a representation of their culture. And then since then, it had been performed a few times for visiting dignitaries, and it's kind of like unclear whether it was sort of a constructed performance for the imperial gaze, or sort of it became this kind of tourist attraction performance. So somewhere along the way, the lines kind of got blurred as to what was sort of, or what these performances were actually meaning and in what context they were being given. The haka specifically that tended to be performed, and especially in the sport world that I'm going to be talking about, is the kamate haka. The background on that, it's sort of just a story about a chief who wrote it, who was in a battle and he was running for his life and he had to hide, and when he came out, he realized this chief of this village protected him, and he was sort of celebrating the fact that he had survived this brush with death. So the famous words in that is kamate, kamate, kora, kora, which means I may die, I may die, I may live, and that's kind of sort of the place he was in. And so it's a celebratory sort of chant celebrating the fact that he had survived this ordeal. And I guess in the context of sports, they perform it right before their matches. So it sort of becomes this like, we're about to go into battle and we hope we survive. So the haka, it's kind of described by experts in the field, I guess. And one of the quotes that I found that spoke to me at least was by Nicola Hyland, when he said, the haka is an evolving cross-disciplinary form. There's an acknowledgement of the form's relevance as a living practice. Haka is or can be many things. It defines a culture's history and people, expresses symbiotic masculine and female strength, is a kind of sport or a prelude to a sport, to a sporting encounter, demonstrates respect and projects a message of love. It can woo or seduce. It can both initiate catharsis and demonstrate resistance against oppression. Just as haka is not one thing, there is often more than one way to understand what the encounter means to the performers and the performed to. Who is doing it, to whom are they doing it, and why? What is the response? So I felt like that it's a good representative of how the performance of the haka can have so many different levels and meanings, and it's based on the Maori terminology that they use when describing it. That kind of makes sense. The spirit of the person that's performing the haka is called the mana in Maori, and so the haka is kind of seen as a dramatization of the mana of the team performing it. And then sort of these other words go into the fact that the haka is a treasured thing that is supposed to induce strong feelings in the people performing it and the people that it's performed to. The wana are those emotions that are evoked. And it's kind of, the performance, it's supposed to sort of induce these emotions, and it's supposed to be like a shared experience. And so I think that's kind of why it's taken a hold of so many people, and why so many people want to perform it, even if they're not necessarily Maori, is because it's meant to evoke these strong emotions. And even if you don't necessarily belong to the culture, you want to after hearing it, and you want to understand, and you want to be a part of that. And so you kind of get caught up in that. And I think that's a big part of why it's been spreading. And so the most notable performers of the Haka are the All Blacks rugby team in New Zealand. It kind of started from the Maori-only rugby team and then spread to the All Blacks team, which was since 1905 has been performing it, so literally over 100 years. And within that context, it's kind of an interesting example of an indigenous culture that reached like mainstream visibility, but in a way that's respectful. It kind of made me think back to our class on mascots and on the Native American Indian mascots and whether or not that's okay. A lot of the backlash on it was how it was a sort of a disrespectful representation of those groups. But here in this, when the All Black kind of took on this Haka performance, it was kind of in an inclusive, participatory, respectful way where they really cared about getting it right and doing it properly. And it was led by Maori people on the team. So it was sort of them wanting to bring their culture to the rest of the team, even if they were not Maori. And it's kind of so much ingrained in the culture now that the Maori people love rugby, and it's kind of their national sport as well within New Zealand. And they actually wrote a specific Haka for the All Blacks team called the Kapa Pango, that means the silver fern, which is the symbol of the All Blacks. So kind of just showing that they're like very supportive of the usage by the All Blacks of the Haka. So I'm going to show a quick video of the All Blacks performing the Haka, which is awesome.
The challenge has been made. Namibia have looked their famous opponents in the eye. Kick-off in a moment.
And then Inia Maxwell, he's an expert in Maori culture, and he actually works with the All Blacks team to make sure that their Haka is sort of like up to par and at an acceptable level to be performed for all these people and represent the Maori culture and the rugby team. And it's kind of, I watched a video of him talking about his feelings of the Haka, and you can really tell how it's such like a part of his life.
That when the Haka is done well, that's what captures people. And they may not be Māori, but there's something in there that they connect with. Haka has been a part of New Zealand for a long time. It will always be Māori. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're Māori, Chinese, Vietnamese, Pākehā, it doesn't matter. We're all one when we hear that Haka performed prior to the match.
But I thought it was interesting that his emphasis when he's talking about the Haka is not necessarily in getting the moves exactly right, but in more of like respecting, like feeling that emotion and like respecting the culture that it comes from, make sure there's understanding there. And he even emphasized that it's not just about being Maori, it's about even reaching the non-Maori people and kind of emphasizing this kind of like all one team thing. And I think he understands why it's so meaningful to the rugby team and kind of gets that. And this kind of segues well into the fact that when the Haka was spread to certain teams in America, why certain times it didn't work out so well. For example, the Arizona Wildcats performed the Haka between 2009 and 2015. It was originally brought by some Polynesian teammates who wanted to do the Haka. However, a petition was started in 2015 to stop them from performing it because it was thought to not be up to par of what the Haka was supposed to be. It was started by this California professor, Dr. Christina Campbell, who thought it was disrespecting the Haka because they were not performing correctly, they were doing the moves wrong, they were pronouncing the language wrong, and so they're not doing the due diligence and respect for the Haka to be able to perform it in a way that was not disrespectful. And so they actually discontinued after this petition. They no longer performed the haka. So that was kind of a case of cultural appropriation that went wrong because they were not giving it the respect it deserved. And that's kind of countered by another American team, the Brigham Young University rugby team, who in 2005 started doing the haka when a teammate of theirs, Bryce Maokai, was the son of a Maori chief's son. So I guess grandson of a Maori chief, and who had just recently lost his father, and they kind of performed a haka at his funeral, and it was a very moving experience that the team went to. And then since that funeral, they started performing the haka as a team, and have continued to this year, even after Bryce graduated. And it was kind of his way of bringing Bryce's culture to his team and wanting like his new rugby family to kind of become a part of his larger Maori family. And so like that's kind of an example of like the fluidity of culture, and you know, cultural appropriation not necessarily being a bad thing if it's being spread in a respectful way by the people themselves to other cultures. It kind of goes into, I don't know, this age of kind of cross talk between cultures and new experiences, and how like, is it a bad thing if you want to spread your culture to another people in a respectful way? And I guess when I looked at the different schools that in America that perform the haka on their sports teams, the kind of common themes that I saw was that they're almost always brought to the team by a Maori or Polynesian person that wants to spread that culture to the team. And they're always performed with respect and reverence. And when they're not, like in the case of the Wildcats, it's discontinued because there's outcry about it. And a lot of care is given to make sure the performance is right. And often they develop their own personal haka. They don't just perform the kamate, because they kind of make it their own, and they make it part of their own. They sort of take ownership of it. So I guess for my paper, the questions I want to dive even deeper into is sort of, is this cultural appropriation always a bad thing? Like, can it be good? Like in these cases I mentioned. Is it okay to perform the haka? When is it not? Who actually owns the haka? There's some intellectual property laws that are kind of in play that are also kind of interesting. How does this compare to the use of Native Americans as mascots, and whose approval matters, you know, in the end? Like, do these experts in Maori culture, are they the ones that should decide this? Should the Maori people decide this? If you're just a scholar researching the culture and just have an interest, is that okay if you want to like kind of take on some of that? It's just kind of a difficult question to answer, and kind of goes into a lot of issues with cultural appropriation in general, like in the hip hop world and things like that, where the boundary is unclear, and it's not always so clear. And maybe because of the kind of essence of the haka and the way it is supposed to be a performance between people and supposed to kind of spread emotion, that maybe it's okay if that emotion's reaching America and not just New Zealand. But I'm sorry I can't be there to answer any questions you may have for me. But to fix that, my number is on the screen, 914-357-0948. Me and Tori are on the bus right now. Probably bored. We're going to Williamstown, and there's not much to do there except play softball. So yeah, call us if you have any questions, and we'll try to answer them. But if not, this is Steph signing out, and this class has been awesome. Thank Claire for accommodating us.